don't have to take pictures because you won't keep up. Plus, everybody wants the PowerPoints, so that's why they're free, so we give them to you. So once you get them, they're yours. You can use them as you want. Now we're going to go and we're looking at this historical critique. This is the critique that all the students want in Nigeria, they want in Ethiopia, and they also want it here in Kenya. At least so far, that's been the case. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask the historical question that is asked of Christianity concerning whether or not Jesus of Nazareth existed, whether or not the Jesus of the crucifixion and the resurrection, whether he existed. We had to answer that question. Let's ask that of Islam. So let's go through, and this is what we're going to start with. This is called the third form of polemics. There are three forms. The first area is what we call internal polemics, which basically starts from the premise that you open the Quran, you look at Muhammad, you see what's in the Quran, you confront what's in the Quran, you confront the man behind the book. That means you confront Muhammad, all his sexual proclivities, his misogyny, his violence. That's what we've been doing. I did that for 30 years. I didn't get many converts. I got an awful lot of anger. And that's what most people are calling hate speech. And that's called Islamophobia. That's the word they term to it. And I moved away from that, and I moved into much more what we call the cultural polemics, looking and seeing what Islam does in the world today, whether or not that's relevant in the Middle East or in Asia or here in Africa or in the United States and Europe. That is much more easy to do because you're looking at present examples. And you can just say, why are they doing this? What are they doing with their women? Why are they covering them up? Why are there so many riots all over the world? Why is there so much violence in Muslim countries? And why are almost all the refugees leaving Muslim countries and coming to the West? Why are they coming to Kenya? Why don't they stay where they belong? Why don't they go to Muslim countries? They always come to the West. They don't go to their own countries. There's something going on here. That's called cultural polemics. The third form of polemics is what I do, and that's the external polemics. This is the material I have moved to. This is by far, we're finding the most profitable. We're getting hundreds of Muslims come to Christ because of this polemics. Basically, this is just basically looking at the historical critique. So, historically, Islam is dependent really on three things. First of all, it's dependent on these three things. One book, one man, in one place. The Quran, Muhammad, and Mecca. Now, if you start to attack one of them, let's say we start attacking Mecca, which we're going to do first. If you then destroy Mecca, it doesn't matter what Muhammad you find. I don't care what Quran you find. If they're not from Mecca, it's not the Muhammad or the Quran of Islam. So that's why we start with Mecca. That's what I'm going to do today. All right? So by shutting down Mecca, by eradicating Mecca, then there is no Islamic Muhammad, there is no Islamic Quran. So let's begin by looking at what Muslims claim about Mecca. Now, what they claim is this. They claim that Muhammad has always existed. Sorry, that Mecca has always existed. Well, no, that's not true. They claim it is the earliest inhabitant of mankind. How do they get that? Well, that's in the Quran itself, in chapter 7. In chapter 7 of the Quran, it says that Adam and Eve are up in space. They are in the Garden of Eden, which is not on earth. So they're out in space. They're thrown out of the Garden of Eden, and they're thrown down to Mecca. Now, that's not in the Quran. You get that from the traditions. So if they're thrown down to Mecca, well, actually, Eve was thrown down to Mecca. Adam was thrown down to Sri Lanka. Don't worry, feet tall. So he just went boom, 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 and joined his wife there in Mecca. But what does that tell you? That means that Mecca has to be the oldest city in the history of mankind because there's no one earlier than Adam and Eve. And you don't have a city unless there are people living in it. So this is the earliest inhabitant for all of mankind. That's what the Quran said in chapter 7, verse 20. Secondly, in chapter 21 of the Quran, it says very clearly that Abraham goes to the Masjid al-Haram, which means the forbidden place of bowing. If that is the case, ask any Muslim, what does the masjid mean? And they say it's the Kaaba. Whether that's correct or not, if they're saying that's the Kaaba, let's run with it. That means that there had to have been Abraham living in Mecca in 1900 BC. I had no idea he lived in Mecca, but according to the Quran, that's where he lived. So at least in 1900 BC, there had to be a place called Mecca for him to have gone into the Kaaba and destroyed all the idols and then been thrown into the fiery pit. Are you following me there? Okay, so that's number two. Number three, what the traditions say is that Mecca was the center of trade, north, south, west, and east. So the entire world came to Mecca. That's why Muhammad became important. That's why his wife Khadija was a trader, and that's what made Mecca the greatest city in the history of mankind. So it's the greatest city by the 7th century when Muhammad was born. If that's the case, someone somewhere should have known about this city, right?
Yep.
And it should be the easiest city to find in any record. It's been there since Adam and Eve. It's been there since Abraham. And it was the center of trade. If Abraham is rebuilding the Kaaba for pilgrimage, then that means millions of pilgrims have been coming to Mecca since 1900 BC. So those pilgrims are talking about this city, are they not? So certainly somewhere should know about this city. Judy, could you find my laser? It's in the second pocket. The third pocket down, all the way at the bottom. Not that one, the computer could be above it, all the way at the bottom. I'm going to have to use my laser to show you what we're talking about here as we get to some of these graphics. So, because of the fact that it's the oldest city, because of the fact that it's the most historical, someone should have heard about it. Now, when you look at Mecca itself, notice what the traditions say about this city. Here, I'll find it. No, it's not the big one. It's this one here. Oh, it's over here. Try that on that side. No, it's not there?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So here you have the traditions that mention that this is the place that has streams, it has clay, it has loam, it has trees, it has olive trees. Folks, there are no olive trees growing except in the Mediterranean, which is 600 to 1,000 miles further north. So already you see there's a problem even with the traditions concerning this place. More than that, when you go to and you open up the Quran and you ask, well, if this is such a great city, then there should be reference after reference after reference to it in the Quran. You only find one reference to it in chapter 48, verse 24. But it doesn't say anything about what it is or where it is. It just says that it is the city, and it talks about this city, this place, this Masjid al-Haram between two mountains. There are no two mountains on either side of the masjid today. So obviously it doesn't seem to suggest that whoever's writing the Quran knew about this city. Even the Arabic, when you look at the Arabic in the Quran as well, look at the Arabic. And does anybody here read and write Arabic? No? At the very back. Yes, sir. Right there. Basa. In Arabic, you have the Ta Marbuta, right? In Arabic. That circle with the two dots, the ending for the make it feminine. You have the Alif Maksura, right? In your Arabic. You have also the definite article, al, right? And the Quran is full of those, right? But that is not the Arabic of Mecca, Medina. The Arabic of Mecca, Medina is called Sabaic Arabic, which comes from the Sabaic area, which is what today would be Yemen and Oman. And in that Arabic, there is no Tar Marbuta, there is no Alif Maksura, there is no definite article, there is no the Al-Kitab. That does not exist. So Basam, if there is none of that, can the Quran have come from Mecca, Medina? It's got the wrong Arabic, right? So where is the Tar Marbuta and the Alif Maksura and the definite article? Where are they? Do they originate? They originate not in Mecca, Medina. That is Nabatean Aramaic. That comes from Jordan, the country of Jordan, specifically Petra, which is 600 miles to the north. Thanks, Bassam, for your help there. So you can see immediately whoever wrote the Quran did not come from Mecca, Medina. What's more, when you open the Quran and you read it, it refers to 65 geographical locations. And what's interesting, when you look at those 65 geographical locations, it refers over and over again to three peoples. The people of Thamud, way up here. There's the people of Thamud, 24 times. Look at Mecca's way down here. That's 600 miles between Thamud. 24 times it refers to this prophet. It doesn't give him a name. You will find the prophet's name only 4 times in the Quran, but mentions that this prophet who's having this contact with these people from Thamud, 24 times, daily contact. 23 times he has relationships with people from Ud would be the biblical Uds. Thamud would be the biblical, what we know as the Nabateans. There is the people from Ud, way up here. They're even further north. That's about 1,000 miles from Mecca way down here. 7 times he has contact over and over again with these people from Midian. Now we know where Midian is right here. But look, Mecca's way down here. How can you have going up and down 600 miles up, 600 miles down in one day? By camel. By helicopter, yes. By airplane, not a problem. But they didn't have helicopters and airplanes in the 7th century. So you can see immediately there's a problem here with the Quran. All these references over and over and over again, these peoples who live way up here were supposed to be way down here. Unless, of course, the Quran was written way up here. Wow, hold on to that. We're going to get into that even more so. Here's another conclusion. When you look at the Quran, it says over and over again that all these great men and women of God who died in Mecca, but it doesn't say Mecca in the Masjid al-Haram or the place of the Prophet over and over again. Who are we talking about? No, I've got the wrong slide there. I'm looking at the wrong people. They're looking at these people who are supposedly there in Mecca and Medina. They're in the Hijaz. But here's the problem. When you look and ask, who are these people? Ask and see who they call themselves. If you look at all the writings from the 7th century, there is reference after reference after reference, people who were called Ishmaelites who lived in Arabia, people who were called Hagarids. Why? Because they come from the line of Ishmael to Hagar. They call themselves the Muhajirites, Muhajirun. Who are the Muhajirun? The people of Hagar, masculine plural. They call themselves the Muhajirites, the place of Hagar. So over and over, these people who are there up in the north, who are writing and are referring to themselves as Arabs, never refer to themselves as Muslims. Show me one reference to the word Muslim anywhere in the 7th century. You won't find it. Show me one reference to the word Islam in the 7th century. You won't find it. Immediately, there's a problem historically. You've got to find Muslims who were there in Arabia because Muhammad was a Muslim, was he not? Someone who believes, someone who obeys. What's more, when you look at the references, they talk about these prophets who have all died. I jumped one of the slides. So the prophets who died, there are about 30 to 300 prophets that have died in and around Mecca. Now, what's interesting is they don't use the word Mecca again. But they mentioned that this is around the Masjid al-Haram, the forbidden place of bowing. If they died in Mecca, they're buried in Mecca. You bury them within 24 hours. They're all buried in a kneeling position so they can continue to pray even as they are dead. Which means their bones should still be there today. Go to Mecca and see if you can find them. Now today in Mecca, if you look at this picture here, there is the 4th highest building in the world, that clock tower. There is the Kaaba right there. Notice all of these cranes. There are 62 of these skyscrapers that are being built all around the Kaaba. When you build a building that high, you have to dig deep foundations. And when you dig deep foundations, the archaeologists show up. Why? Because they want to see what you're digging up. Because when you dig that deep down, you start bringing up artifact after artifact after artifact. The archaeologists look at those artifacts and they recreate the history of the city. That's what you do with ancients, every ancient city. And the same with this city, because this is the oldest city in the world. Nothing is earlier than Mecca. So the archaeologists have shown up. A friend of mine named Dan Gibson went to Dubai for an archaeologist conference, and he purposely sat at the table of the Saudi Arabian archaeologists. And he says, what have you found? You have the oldest city in the world. You must be finding thousands of artifacts. They would not respond to him. He asked them again, tell me, what's the oldest thing you have found in Mecca? And they said, well, the oldest thing so far that we have found is the ruins of an Ottoman fort from 1299 AD, not BC, AD. That's the 13th century. That's 700 years after Mecca was supposedly being lived in by Muhammad. That's the earliest material they can find in Mecca. Now notice, if you look carefully here, you will see right here, that is Khadija's wife, Khadija's house. Khadija is the first wife of Muhammad. That is where she lived. Notice they have now destroyed it and covered it over with cement. Right next to it over here is where Muhammad was born. It no longer exists. They have now covered it up and cemented it up. Why? Why do you think they're covering up the most important artifacts in their own history. Well, I know why. They're trying to hide the evidence. They know what we know, or they're listening to what we have found. And they realize we've got to cover this evidence up. So they're cementing it all over. Thank God we don't do that with our artifacts. Now, Dr. Patricia Corona is probably the world's leading authority on the city of Mecca. She did her doctorate at SOAS, University of London. She then became head of department at Oxford University in the Middle Eastern Studies, and she wrote a book called Hagerism in 1977. Got death threats for writing that book, so she moved to Cambridge University, and she then wrote another book called Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam in 1987. This woman from Denmark can read and write 15 archaic languages. How many of you can read and write 15 archaic languages? I don't see one hand. She is unique in the world. She is the only woman who has been able to study all of these languages. So she knows Akkadian, she knows Nabatean Aramaic, she knows Syriac Aramaic, she knows all of these archaic languages, she knows Nubian, all these languages from that area. And so she wrote a book, and she just wanted to find out any reference for Mecca. And she went to all the trading documents from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way up into the 8th century. No reference in any language for any place called Mecca. So she went then to she wanted to go to the different empires of that place. So she went to these empires here, and she started with the Persians over here. Reading their language, no reference to Mecca. So she went to the Babylonians, no reference to Mecca. She went to the Syrians up here, no reference to Mecca. She went to the Romans, all the Romans over here, not one word about Mecca. She said, okay, well, maybe these are too far away. Let's go to the more closer empires. She went to the Himyarites down here, the Ashkenites down here. She went to the Isfahanites over here, and of course the Nabateans up there. Not one word about Mecca. So she went to the Nubians here. Now remember, she read all their documents. All of these near empires that were right around Mecca, which is right there. Not one word. Wait a minute. If this is the oldest city in the history of mankind, if this is where Abraham lived, if this was the center of trade, north, south, east, and west, where were the pilgrims all coming from? They're all coming from here. All these places you see in red. And yet not one reference she could find. Not one reference at all. So she said, okay, maybe it's because these places were they were all too insignificant. Mecca was just too insignificant. So let's go to the other insignificant towns that are surrounding Mecca. So she decided to go to these towns that you see here, starting in Aden in the south, going to Sana'a, going to Najran, then to Taif, then to Yathrib, then to Khaybar, then to Tabuk, and then to Gaza in the north. So those are all the red stars that you see here. She went to every one of those, and she said, is there any reference to those cities? She could find reference to every one of those cities going all the way back to 3rd century BC. Nothing to Mecca. Yet these are just small oases on the Western Plateau. They could only accommodate 200 to 300 people. Mecca supposedly had 120,000 Sahaba, just Sahaba alone, when Muhammad was living. How could no one have heard about Mecca, which was the center of trade, the oldest city in history, yet these insignificant towns have all been historically dated and located? So she looked at a map, and she looked down from a space, and she saw the answer. And here's the map she looked at. If you look from space, you can notice that all of these cities are along the Western Plateau. Notice they're up above on a Western Plateau. That's where the aquifers are. That's where the water wells are. That's why they're there, because they are oases for the camels who come on the trade route. Where is Mecca? Completely off the Western Plateau, 3,000 feet down off the plateau with no water. If there's no water, then there's no grass. There's no food for the camels. No wonder she couldn't find any reference to Mecca. So she decided, well, that's pretty much, she shut down the Montgomery's Watt trade route theory. And then she said, well, where did all the trade go? Now she read, and she could read all the documents from all these trading documents from the 2nd century all the way up. And she found out that all the trading documents